Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia, and I'm so happy I have my new friend here, Rahkim Sabree, and he's going to talk to us about financial trauma in the Black community, and there's enough of that, and particularly with the Black families. And we all know there's enough of those instances. So I'm real excited to have Rahkim here. I've been following you, Rahkim, on social media. He's been killing it in social media and on Instagram, and I just love everything you post. I love everything that you talk about. I'm in the back cheering you on, putting in likes and hearts and stuff. And so how about you introduce yourself, Rahkim?
Thank you. Just the pronunciation, I can't spell today, of my name is
Rahkim.
Rahkim.
Okay.
Rahkim, like that rapper. So Rahkim.
Rahkim. Okay.
Yep. I talk about financial trauma and financial empowerment for people who look like me. Have been focusing a lot of my content on the intersection of wealth, mental health, and race. As I don't see a lot of people talking about those things in the same kind of breath. So my background initially was in banking. I did 10 years in the banking industry. In May of 2021, I decided to leave banking to pursue entrepreneurship full time. And since then, I have been really kind of off the deep end, right? Emerged in figuring out what that looks like, niching into financial trauma and kind of my primary talking point, coming from a very generalized financial education approach. And it seems to be going pretty well, right? People are resonating with the content. People are reacting to the content. And like I said, it's not something that a lot of people are talking about in the way that I talk about it. So I feel good about being in this space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that financial trauma is like a common experience among Black families, particularly in the United States. I mean, we have a history of systemic racism and economic inequalities, and Black families, I think, historically have been subjected to discriminatory policies and practices, and I think it's been limiting in terms of our ability to have these economic opportunities, and our ability to accumulate wealth has been impacted. So, according to what you understand, what are the primary sources of financial trauma faced by Black families?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there when we talk about um, the systemic exclusion via institutional racism. And really the biggest part of that, we know that those things exist, but society at large doesn't often acknowledge that those things exist in conjunction with this idea that finance is the magic bullet, right, to solving these problems. And so when we look at financial trauma specifically as it impacts Black people through the lens of a larger generational trauma that we've experienced in the country, it's a little bit, it actually is a lot of bit different than the way that financial trauma is talked about from maybe a clinical perspective, or I use the word sanitized perspective, when academics are kind of dissecting, well, what's happening in the brain, what are situations that occur that can trigger financial trauma or cause financial trauma. And so when we look at things like poverty, poverty doesn't look the same for everybody, right? Poverty for a white person looks a little bit different than poverty for a Black person. And I think the variables that you mentioned is that difference. So as you're trying to climb yourself out of these behaviors, these beliefs, these ideas around money, you're facing the opposition of institutions and, again, society at large, kind of gaslighting you into, well, that's not an issue. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? And so, my presence in this space is to kind of shine a light on that and say, wait, there is a connection here, and we need to acknowledge that connection if we're going to move forward.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like we're kind of behind the curve here, and not even getting into a conversation about reparations. It's just like we just don't know what we don't know because it's intergenerational. And I'm just wondering, how do you think a basic lack of financial literacy impacts a lot of the economic opportunities that could be available to Black families in our community?
Yeah, so my answer is not going to be a popular one, but I don't think that financial literacy is the answer, right? I think that there are a lot of people, I know there are a lot of people based off of experience, right, that are financially literate, right? They have a financial education and they know what they should be doing, but they don't feel empowered to do so. And so that's not as simple as looking at this from a 1 + 1 = 2 situation, right? We have to look at what are the internalized beliefs that we have around money within our community? What are the internalized beliefs that we have around the acquisition of wealth, which is a different thing, right? Um, there's a lot of narratives, right, that we kind of circulate in our community around money being the root of all evil, or that in order for somebody to have accomplished great wealth, they had to do something terrible, right? They had to sell their soul, so to speak. And so long as we have this negative perception of what the acquisition of wealth looks like, or we limit our ideas around the acquisition of wealth to becoming a rapper or entertainer, becoming an actor, becoming an athlete, then we're going to miss on the opportunities to build wealth in the ways that people outside of our communities are. If I think about, I mean, so many things, right? Group economics. I think about, our aversion to trusting financial institutions. So why would we put our money in the bank? And moreover, why would we put our money into the stock market? There's a lot of misinformation that's circulating online and through social media around how you should be executing on these strategies. There's a lot of predatory behavior that exists from members, from financial educators rather outside of our community, but also from financial educators within our community. And so how do you sort through who's giving you the real authentic and who just tries to come up off of your ignorance? And so I think financial education, financial literacy, is important. I think that it's something definitely that we should continue to strive to provide and to acquire. But I think more than that, we need to do some healing, right? We need to do some psychological assessments of where we are, understanding our relationship with money, perhaps engaging in financial therapy and a greater therapy as a whole, right? There's this disconnect within our community around engaging in mental health practices or professionals. And so, yeah, I think those are the issues that kind of prevent us from moving forward. And then, of course, at the bottom of all of that, there is the individuals who don't have a financial education. So when they do get that financial education, what then stops them or should incentivize them to move forward with what it is that they've learned and applying it in their own life?
No, what you're saying, I'm jumping out of my chair because it's really exciting because in the Black Business School, we have a financial therapy department, and every other Sunday night, we talk about just those things. I mean, part of it is having the knowledge, and the thinking is that when you know better, you do better. But at the same time, you also have this behavior that's not syncing up with what you know better. And you got all of these sharks out here that's manipulating us. And of course, we have trust issues, and when it comes to like putting our money and investing our money and letting go of things. So all of this coming together has an impact on how we see economic opportunities and what we put our money in. And then at the same time, we got this internal need. I mean, we've talked several times about shopping addictions, about our need to compare ourselves to other people. And in order for me to be a good person, I got to spend all my money on a car, which is like the worst thing to do with your money. You get some money, first thing you do is buy a brand new shiny car and not invest it. So we talk about what's driving us to do that. And I do talk about trauma, about, a history of trauma. It stops our ability, our impulse control. We just see something that we want. Everything has to be immediate right now. Right now, I want what I want right now. Forget about tomorrow. Living in the moment in that sense, and it's hurting us economically. And we don't have this wealth to pass on to our children. It's nothing sad. I used to work in a hospital, and there's nothing more sad then if a loved one has passed on and they're looking at me, the social worker, about what do we do with the burial, and I'm just like, you have to pass the hat around. There's nothing sad that when you pass on, you have nothing to give but some funeral bills to your loved ones because of the decisions that you've made. So you can comment on that.
Yeah, I think that there's the reluctance to engage in practices that would preserve wealth, not from a perspective of not wanting to, right? I don't think anybody wants to leave a burden of debt or financial responsibility for their family. But I also think that there's, and I've had a lot of conversations around this, there's kind of like this unknown or lack of confidence in, how long are we going to be here, right? And so, specifically the line of thinking that I've entertained is you have all of these financial educators talking about, buy life insurance, invest in your retirement account, et cetera, et cetera. And really the variable that makes those things successful most times is time. But if you have a generation of young people who don't believe that they'll live that long, right? Who, maybe think that they won't make it to 30, why are they going to be looking forward to 65 plus? And so on the other end of that, we have, cultural nuances that the YOLO, right? I need to spend what I have now because I don't know if I'm going to have what I have now tomorrow. And so that incentivizes exactly the behavior that you described, right? Going out and getting the nice car, going out and, spending money on items, trying to keep up with the Joneses because, well, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to enjoy it with the thing because maybe I won't be here tomorrow. And that's not just the issue of mindset, right? That's the issue of reality. Like we've seen it over the last several years, young people dying, whether that be due to gun violence, whether that be due to police violence, right? Whether that be due to substance abuse. And so it's a greater problem that certainly leaks over into the way that we look at and manage, navigate our financial pictures. But I think that the disconnect when we're talking to, financial educators and practitioners, that we're not looking at the whole picture. We're just looking at, well, they're not budgeting, right? Well, they're not saving, they're not investing, they're not, planning for retirement. But when those moments occur that trigger a financial trauma, or called a financial trauma, right? A layoff, an eviction, a repossession, anything within, big T and little T trauma, and that's going to have an influence on how you engage with your money moving forward. And more than that, how you show others or teach others how to engage with their money. So if my grandmother had a financial trauma that she passed on down to my dad, and my dad maintains this behavior, not realizing where the trauma came from and passes it on down to me, well, now that's 3 generations of trauma impacting me, and I don't even know why it's impacting me. And so I think, again, there's great work being done to educate people, particularly Black people, on the nuances of financial management and what are the things that we should be doing. But I think there's a variable of the why, right? Why should we be doing these things? What is the goal that we're looking to accomplish that needs to be expounded on? And then also there needs to be healing work done through the lens of financial therapy, through the lens of just healing on a greater level, right? And I would go as far as to say spiritually, that impacts our whole body, or our whole being rather. And so we can see what that looks like in our finances as well.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about it being intergenerational, because what I'm seeing a lot with my clients is that as they tell these stories that are intergenerational, I'm thinking, this is trauma, and they have no idea. They just think it's just normal. This is the way it is. So part of it is really tough because it's like a process in place where you have to raise awareness to say, these things aren't healthy. They're not healthy for your future. And you start asking questions, how's this working for you? And and you start discovering and deconstructing all of these situations where people feel really upset and you start realizing that it's not working for them. Okay, so before I get into my last question with you, I want to ask you, are there any good books you're reading right now?
So I'm reading The Psychology of Money. That's a pretty good book.
Okay.
Yeah, that. I picked it up and I pick it apart. Um, Big fan of Julian and Kirsten Sanders from Rich and Regular. They have a book called Cashing Out. So I'm catching up on that. Um, and that's it for right now. I have a ton of books on hold. But I do want to share a non-financial book that I think certainly can impact and has impacted the way that I view these conversations, called Becoming Supernatural. I forget what the author's name is, but it really helped me look at what are the neurological processes of this trauma and how do we kind of like escape that. And a lot of that is like, visualization and um, you know, mindfulness, and just it's a phenomenal book. And I think that it does contribute quite a lot to, and I know that he has other books, but I haven't read them yet, but it contributes a lot to the way that I approach finances in these conversations around financial counseling, financial therapy, because it is just a larger than the 1 + 1 = 2 issue.
Goodness, if we all became supernatural, this entire economic community, our whole economic system would collapse. If we all just decided that we're going to love ourselves and it's not important what we have and what we have on and all of those things. We just only need our basic needs to survive, and all this extra stuff is really just extra. Oh gosh, this is a great, interesting book. So, The Psychology of Money and Becoming Supernatural. That might be a book I might read, The Becoming Supernatural, because I love stuff like that. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Okay. So our last question for today is, what strategies do you think can be used to counter generational wealth disparities among Black families?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? And so I don't know that I have an answer that solves for that big of an issue, but um, looking at this through the lens of financial trauma, which I think is just a very small slice of a larger issue, there's a framework that I've been kind of playing around with through my own experience, and I refer to it as 3 E's, right? So that's exposure, education, execution. And so, within my own story, I grew up experiencing poverty. I grew up in Western County, New York. My mom had Section 8, and had food stamps, the whole deal, right? And I tell that part of the story. And within that, I had recognized that we were surviving, right? Survival was enough. And so my goal, when I was still, living in that environment was, well, when I become of age, I'm going to go out, I'm going to apply for Section 8, I'm going to get food stamps, I'm going to get my own apartment, and I'm going to do the same thing that I'm doing with my mom now. And it did not occur to me that homeownership was possible for me, especially at a young age, until my environment changed. And I started to engage and interact with people who were within my age range who owned property. And so that's the exposure piece, right? Understanding that it's possible, seeing that it's possible, being around and interacting with people who have done it. The education piece is learning how to make that thing possible, right? So what are the steps that you need to take in order to accomplish this goal? For me, a lot of that was understanding and building credit, saving money so that I can have a nice down payment, understanding that I needed a down payment, right? Understanding what are the programs available to me based off of my income, based off of the money that I had saved, based off of my credit. And then lining up the right professionals to kind of help guide me through that process, whether that was, the realtor, whether that was a lender, whether that was, just anybody, right? A mentor who could walk me through the process. And then lastly was the execution piece. And I think that piece is the most important, because even though I had saw that it was possible, decided that it was something that I wanted, got the education to go out and do the thing, right? Had everything lined up. in the moment before pulling the trigger, the series of what if questions started to come, right? And so that's that resurfacing of that trauma that says, well, I'm familiar with this way. This is uncharted territory that I've never been in. What if these things happen?
Mm-hmm.
And, fortunately, I had a very strong support system and community at that time who helped me to kind of navigate what those feelings looked like. But had I not, and had I kind of gave in to that doubt, the change of, the devil you know versus the devil you don't, I may not have pulled the trigger and ended up buying. So I ended up buying a home at 26. Um, and, it was the result of kind of like that framework. So I kind of take that framework and I talk about it quite a lot when we look at financial trauma within the Black community, because sometimes it's not even just a zip code issue, right? It might be one half of the railroad tracks where we only see this very small fraction of what financial success can look like, or what just cultural variances can look like. Traveling was huge for me. Getting out of the city that I grew up in was huge for me. Education was huge for me. Reading books was huge for me. And so when you get to see more than, what you see every single day, you can dream bigger. And then in dreaming bigger, you can start to kind of put together a process for, well, what does this look like, or what can this look like for me? And I believe that, once you set those intentions, that the universe conspires to make that thing happen for you. So, I don't want to oversimplify it. I think that that's doing a disservice to people, and it's insensitive to say, like, all you have to do is just dream bigger. We spend a lot of time talking about what those barriers look like, systemically and structurally and within the industry. But I do think that it's important to acknowledge what those barriers look like, and then learn how to navigate through those barriers in whatever way that you can, because at the end of the day, like, nobody's coming to save us, right? So we have to do the work ourselves. And in that, it's an unfortunate truth, but we if we just sit and wait, then we're leaving our destiny in the hands of somebody else who's not invested, who hasn't been invested in helping us progress, and certainly not invested in helping us progress in the future.
Yeah, I mean, Rahkim, this is like you becoming supernatural. You came out the formula of becoming supernatural, because I know you say it's simple. You don't want to oversimplify it, but it is pretty simple, although it's not easy. Some things that are simple aren't very easy to do. And this is great. I like this exposure, because you were exposed to surviving, but you went from surviving to thriving, right? And your next step was education, which, I mean, any and everything that you could possibly know is free to you. So there's no excuse for not being educated and for knowing better. And then executing, I think it's really, really interesting, because all of this is going to take discipline. It has to take discipline. You have to be able to stop giving away your power to other people. And it's a very powerful experience to be able to be disciplined enough to say, no, I'm not going to spend money on this. I'm going to spend money on, I'm going to save up because I know I need to have a down payment. Or no, I'm not going to buy furniture right now, because you've read and you learn, you buy furniture right before you think you're going to buy a house. They're going to be like, what's this credit card charge? Delete, And I understand that. And I love the fact that execution is so important, because I bought, gosh, in my lifetime, I think I have closed on about 5 or 6 homes in my lifetime. And it was clunky every time. It was like, and I remember going, God, if I could do that again, I would do that different. And I did do it again, and I did do it different. So it's like, don't let that fear and that doubt stop you. There are things, buying a house ain't no joke. It's like giving away your first child, especially the first time you do it. It's very annoying, but it's a way of telling people, this is how you give to your family, generational wealth. This is how you give, money that you are investing in, not only home ownership, but the benefits, the financial benefits of owning your own home than paying rent to somebody else. I mean, there we go. Anyway, thank you so much for interviewing. with me. I reached out to you on Instagram. I'm glad you got back to me because I love your page. I hope everybody follows him on Instagram. Of course, you can follow me, Coaching with Dr. Alicia. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.